Apart from being one of the most underrated players of the last decade, David Villa lived one of the most inspiring lives out of any footballer. Right from the start, he kept being knocked down, but no matter what he had to overcome, he pushed through it, and despite only arriving at Barcelona at 29 years of age, he had enough time to build one of the most impressive trophy cabinets in the sport, to bring the Spanish national team to glory after 40 years with no trophies, and to change football forever, revolutionizing what it meant to be a striker. So if you're in need of some motivation, this is the right video for you. Let's start with the elephant in the room. David's father saved his life. At the age of 4, young David was playing football when another kid fell on top of him and fractured his femur. This would be catastrophic for anyone. After all, the femur is the biggest and strongest bone in the human body. After being rushed to the hospital, there were two options. They could either send him to surgery, immediately relieving him of the pain, though there was a high chance that he would end up having two different sized legs, reducing his mobility and causing him to limp for the rest of his life. Or they could put his leg in a cast, from his ankle to his hip. David could spend months completely immobile under excruciating pain, but at least he'd have a good chance of making a full recovery. His father was a miner. Every day he descended 3,000 feet into the darkness, completely destroying his health for the sake of his kids. Football had always been his passion, and since his son had been born, he had wished for him to become a footballer. So that day, he decided David would go with the harder option, and no matter how much pain he went through, it eventually paid off. After 6 months in a cast, not only did he make a full recovery, but the physiotherapy his dad put him through as he attempted to regain motion in his left leg led him to become ambidextrous, meaning he simply didn't have a weak foot anymore. His father would work extra hours in the mine just so his boss allowed him to stay home longer after lunch to help David with his rehabilitation. David himself would one day say, "You could see how damaged his body had become. His back probably hurt more than my leg, but he would do anything for me. Even if it meant spending more hours in the mine, he would never miss one of my practices." This was not even the only time his father saved his career. At 14, David had a falling out with the coach and ended up being benched for an entire season. He started insisting that it was time to quit, that it was pointless. But with his father watching, David felt that he couldn't break his heart by quitting like that. And soon, against all odds, he got scouted by Sporting Gijon. But trust me, his career would be a never-ending fight, and so came his next battle. Though his father was madly in love with football, his mother not so much, and as Villa went into his apprenticeship to become an electrician, he began feeling like he had to pick between the two. His mother wasn't having it, but then he shocked her with a proposal. "Give me 2 years, if I don't make the first team by then, I will quit football forever." 700 or so days later, Villa must have been a pile of nerves, feeling the date becoming closer and closer, but then it happened. Among the thousands of fans in the stands, his mother, Dorita, cried tears of pride for her son, who after being told by Real Oviedo that he was too short to be a striker, was now making his debut in the Segunda División. Even if there was still doubts regarding some of his other attributes, one thing was agreed upon by everyone. His work ethic was a step above everyone else's, and I'm sure Villa would have no problem in admitting that he owed that to his father. Villa wasted no time, and right on both of his two first full seasons at the club, he scored 20 goals, nearly topping the league's goal-scoring charts on both occasions. In fact, it seemed he was decided to pull through and get his team to La Liga. But as they began struggling financially, it was decided they had to cash in on their wonder kid, and so a move was set up to Real Zaragoza. Now playing in the big leagues, Villa proved there was no way to stop him, going on to score 17 league goals in his first season, staying close to the top of the charts among other young talents like Fernando Torres and Samuel Eto'o. He even managed the shocking 4 goals in a single game against Sevilla. But what set him apart was that those league games weren't even his best performances of the year. In the Copa del Rey, he started off incredibly, scoring in both the first 2 rounds, and then, as he came on at halftime to face Barcelona at the Camp Nou, he managed to pull off the only goal of the game to secure a legendary victory for Zaragoza. After 3 consecutive draws, Zaragoza made it onto the final, and indeed, it would be a test above all others. The last team to beat was Real Madrid, Los Galácticos with Beckham, Zidane, Figo, and you know what I mean. But the fact is, by halftime, Zaragoza were in front, a goal scorer, a young man now known as David Maravilla. With a red card coming their way, Zaragoza would concede, but after a tumultuous match, a goal in extra time would see them snatch the trophy from Real. It was Villa's first piece of silverware, ensuring that Zaragoza would play in the following year's UEFA Cup, and that David was Spain's greatest young talent. Keep in mind, this was the team's first year back in the top flight. It was absolutely incredible what they had just achieved. Unfortunately, money was the issue once again. Without proper financial backing, Zaragoza struggled to maintain their previous success, and despite nearly making it to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Cup, by the end of the year, Villa was put on the market once again. Another player with this sort of achievements could have easily made it to one of Europe's top teams, but Villa didn't ever experience the sort of marketing and media treatment of some other young talents. All he had going for him was the voice of the people chanting his name, and that year, Valencia decided to listen, and so, through a move worth 12 million euros, began the next chapter of his career. After an unsuccessful Intertoto Cup, Villa started his life at Valencia with 27 goals in a season, the most successful debut season in the history of the club, one that included a brace at the Camp Nou, a winner at the Bernabeu, and a hat-trick against Bilbao. And though he was already 24 years old, it was official. He had finally made it out of the trenches of domestic football. He was the man under the spotlight, and soon it would get even brighter because those 27 goals ensured Valencia would have a shot at the Champions League next season. Something else that arrived that year was his first ever call-up to the World Cup. Villa debuted with a brace and Spain finished the group stage undefeated, but then Zinedine Zidane's France came in their way, and with 28 minutes gone, surprisingly, Aragonés called not Raúl, not Torres, but David Villa to the penalty spot. It was the most heart-wrenching moment of his career, but then he simply scored. Unfortunately, it would all be pointless with France putting 3 goals past them before full time. It had now been 42 years since Spain last won a trophy, but Villa would make it his life's work to bring them back to glory. The following year, Villa partnered up with Morientes, and that season changed football forever in the eyes of many. Villa was not like the average striker. In fact, that year he scored a mere 15 league goals, but as Johan Cruyff himself pointed out, he was not just there to finish plays. Villa was always the smartest player in the final third. He would fake runs and drag defenders off of Morientes, leaving him with a chance to score. He would assist him so frequently that he would actually end up being the league's top assist provider that year. And besides all that, he was even capable of dropping off to cover other positions depending on what his team needed. Those attributes led him to 7 goals and assists in 9 matches in that year's Champions League, only going out in the quarterfinals against Chelsea with a last-minute goal by Essien. But above all, they led Luis Aragonés to make a hard decision. Being faced with the imminent rise of modern Spanish football, Aragonés saw that Villa's qualities would prove to be a better fit for the team in the long term, and so he risked it all by leaving Raúl González, Spain's all-time top scorer, out of the squad in favor of Villa, who would even take his predecessor's iconic number 7. To many, it was sacrilege, but Villa would eventually prove them all wrong. After a season where many hoped Valencia would go further than ever thanks to young talents such as David Silva and Juan Mata, they ended up finishing 10th. Winning the Copa del Rey had been the only upside to that year. But over summer came an opportunity for Villa, the 2008 Euros. Over the qualification, Villa had already been the team's top scorer, and after opening the tournament with a hat-trick in a 4-1 win over Russia, everyone's hopes went through the roof. Had to add a last-minute goal to rescue the 3 points in the next match, and just imagine how crazy the hype around him was. Villa got rested in the last match and then clutched up against Italy, scoring the first penalty of the shootout before having to come off against Russia in the semi-finals thanks to an injury to his thigh. Unfortunately, Villa would have to miss the final, and though I'm sure that bothered them, seeing Spain finally get another international trophy had to feel amazing, especially with them winning the tournament's Golden Boot. Over his final 2 years with Valencia, Villa would hit some of his best goal-scoring form to date, and they would go back to be title challengers, though not much would come from it. Except for confirmation of how incredibly influential Villa had been. Just take a second to appreciate this. Over the 5 years he spent at Valencia, only Samuel Eto'o managed to score more goals, and even he barely managed to outdo Villa, despite him playing for a much weaker side and being much less focused on goal scoring. It was clear to everyone, Villa was the perfect modern striker. And you know who else saw that? Pep Guardiola, who put down a €40 million bid for the player, who once again heavily disliked the idea of leaving his club but ended up being forced to, as a quick way to fix the club's financial problems. Regardless, we would finally get to see what Villa looked like in one of the world's most dominant teams. We had waited long for this. Villa was now 29 years old. But before that, there was time for something else, something that would make him a legend of Spanish football forever. Welcome to David Villa's 2010 World Cup. With high hopes following their win at the 2008 Euros, every Spaniard's heart sank after their opening match defeat to Switzerland, and all of their next 5 matches could have suffered the same fate had it not been for Villa, who came to the rescue like pretty much no one ever had. The following match, a 2-0 win to Honduras, Villa scored both. Then Chile could have sent them out in the group stage, but Villa came through with a goal and an assist to make the match 2-1. With the stakes even higher in the knockout stage, Villa scored the only goal of the match against Portugal and then provided Paraguay with the same treatment. Spain were in the semi-finals and every goal had either been scored or assisted by Villa. From then on he calmed down, but a late goal by Puyol put them in the final, and then another late goal, this time by Iniesta, made them world champions. 10 years after his debut, his parents were still in the stands, and if back then it was his mother who cried, now it was his father. After decades by his side, it finally happened. His son was a world champion, and the cherry on the cake, the tournament's top scorer. Even though the golden boot would go to Thomas Müller, who played less minutes, and the golden ball would go to Forlán, there was no question that Villa had one of the greatest World Cup performances of all time. As Mourinho once said, "They can take the ball home, I'll take the 3 points," or in this case, the World Cup trophy. At Barcelona, he very quickly hit his peak, finishing his first season just 1 match short of a treble, with Cristiano Ronaldo famously scoring in the Copa del Rey final to rob them of the final trophy. However, winning the Champions League was still a huge landmark in his career. After all, he had only won 3 trophies at club level up to this point, and of course, it helped that he got to score a beautiful goal in the final. No matter how much potential everyone saw in this new stint at Barcelona, its second season would come to send it all crashing down. Halfway into his second season, Villa would play the Club World Cup, and it would all end disastrously. Villa broke his fibula. If it already sounded bad to start with, eventually everyone realized it was even worse. It would take an astonishing 8 months before Villa made it back to the pitch, and that meant missing the Euro 2012, especially heartbreaking given how essential he had been in their last few tournaments. By the time he came back, he was hungry to prove that not even this could stop him, but he would spend the rest of the season being constantly left in the bench. Clearly there was something in the works, and you could sense his departure was already being planned. What other reason could you have to constantly leave a player on the bench when he seemed to score every time he came off of it? For some perspective, by the end of the season he had 16 goals and 8 assists, despite only playing the full 90 in 9 occasions. He literally averaged a goal contribution every 94 minutes, and still, it didn't change their minds. Once Neymar arrived, Villa was offloaded to Atletico Madrid for an absolute bargain of 5.1 million euros, and it became clear that that had been the plan all along. As much as his prime was now past him, Villa didn't just wallow in his own misery. He joined Atletico with the goal of pulling off the unthinkable. The goal was to win La Liga. Right from the start of the season, his first goal came against Barcelona. The revenge was underway. Over the season, Villa showed up in the most desperate of moments, securing points when it seemed they had already been lost, and by the last match day of the season, they had to face Barcelona at the Camp Nou. If Barcelona won, they'd be champions, otherwise it would be Atletico who would take the title. First, Alexis Sanchez put Barcelona in front, but then the classic Atletico goal, a Diego Godin header from a corner kick. The match ended in a 1-goal draw and Atletico were champions. Precisely at the Camp Nou, revenge could not get much sweeter. Alongside all of this, Atletico went on their best ever Champions League run, being denied the trophy as Sergio Ramos scored in injury time to send the final match into extra time. Oh, what it could have been for David Villa on his very last season of European football. To finish off his career, he played a few matches at Melbourne City in Australia and then joined New York FC, where most stars only look for a victory lap and an extra zero on their bank account balance. But Villa was different. He didn't care if the stakes weren't the same. Football meant the world for him, no matter where or how it was played. He put blood, sweat and tears into every match, and after 4 years at the club with 80 goals scored, he had left his mark forever. After one more season in Japan, alongside Iniesta, Villa finally called it quits. He had 438 goals, 59 of them in just 98 matches for Spain, making him their all-time top scorer. David Maravilla, one of the most underrated players of all time, changed football forever. Oh, and by the way, if you made it to the end, please like the video. It helps a lot. Why not? Come on, just click the thingy.